in my mind, a lot of the culture shift started to happen in about 2015.
Let me ask you this. From your point of view with the transition of that, it
Yeah.
wasn't top down. It wasn't coming from the administrators in the college, pushing that type of ethos down. It was literally coming from like primary, secondary education kids from high school coming into college, kind of forcing that aspect into the colleges.
I feel like that's kind of where the genesis of it was, because I can't think back to any type of communication from like the provost or the department head or anybody like that, our chairs, saying, hey, this is what's happening. This is how we need to do things. I feel like the genesis of it, in my perspective, was specific students coming up to me and or my teachers via email or in person before class started to discuss like how they wanted to be told and talked to, and basically their expectation. So, did it come from parents that were a little bit more radical, or was it from a lower education standpoint and then that, trickle up effect?
What about when you were at K-State? I mean, did you see
Nothing,
kind of all
never.
that craziness there at all?
Not once. Not.
And what years
ever.
what years were you there?
I was at K-State from 2008 to 2010.
Okay, well, this is kind of making some sense actually, because Lisa says they moved here in 2015 and they moved from California. And she said things started to change around there. And, my last years in the 7th grade classroom were 2002. Part of the reason why part of the reason she retired and I left were because we had just seen the standards for behavior, for everything. The parents were coming in and dictating essentially how we were able to teach the kids. And so that was in 2002. And this whole helicopter parent thing was just taking off then. Do you see what I did there? But no, in all seriousness, though, that seems to be, I know in 2002, we were already starting down that PC, you have to be super careful. You can't touch him. You can't do this. So we were already starting down that road in 2002. So I definitely think this is a bubble up.
Well, and here's the other thing too that I noticed that I think is worth noting too is, when I first started teaching there, communication with the students and just interaction in class, because all my classes were pretty small. I'm talking 20 to 30 people per classroom. And it was always a very interactive classroom because of the subject matter and what we used to do. But I felt like as the years kind of progressed towards 2015, 2016, it became increasingly hard to connect with the students, especially in the beginning, like first week or two of class. And I really think that's because of the boom in social media and personal devices with cell phones and things. And so communication, like face to face, orally and all those things just became different. And then could some of the trickle in effect, not only parents and lower education coming up, but also what was being pushed in terms of just socially on Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of things, because I think some of it came from there too, of students seeing like, oh, well, this person's identifying as this, that's how I feel like a victim or this or that. And so then they start to adopt that ideology too, because I think a lot of it is like a cult-like mentality, and they're seeing it on the Instagrams, and I got to live this way and this kind of life. And I think it really affected that generation of students a lot, because they grew up kind of with, media and a phone and those things, versus like, you talked about O2 and students. That was about when I was in 7th and 8th grade, if I kind of think back to it. And I didn't even use a cell phone until I was late high school, early junior college.
Well, they were just coming in.
Exactly.
Then.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think as you kind of progress that with the generation that was maybe just about 5-6 years before that, they're growing up with this just constant gender ideology and things from social media. So I think that was part of it too.
Yeah. Remember, we've had TSS Smith on and Dr. Mather on, and they've all basically talked about that so much of the genesis of at least the sexual orientation stuff and the pronouns and that kind of thing
Yeah.
Came, especially, I mean, it just really boomed during COVID when all they had time to do was just sit there and do this all day.
Could it be like these things you hear about, the bot farms and this and that, and putting this kind of thing into our culture because they know we're going to consume it and get crazy with it, right? So the consumption of that type of media, I felt like super boomed from like 2010 to like 2015, 2016, ramping up into Trump's first election. And that's really when I started to saw a huge change then from top down from the university was, mid 2015 during that election cycle, because then it became a whole fear. Like, what happens if this racist, misogynistic, rapist president gets into the office, right? Well, what's going to happen with my students that go across campus and they're afraid for their life? That we had meetings like that in late 2015. And so I feel like that was kind of the precipice for a lot of the change that we see.